Welcome to today's lesson. My name is Sidi Sotlaka, and today we'll be looking into Business Studies Paper 1 revision. And remember, this lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Today we look into a revision program and the focus is on paper 1. But what are we looking into in paper 1? We are looking into business environment. Now, by the end of this lesson, this is what you should understand. Hence, we are talking about the lesson outcomes. This is what we should achieve at the end of this lesson. Number 1, you should know the structure of the paper to say what is going to be covered in paper 1. You should also be in a position to know the main topics that are assessed in paper 1 and also be able to interpret section B and section C questions. Now, the structure for our paper is the first part of our lesson. With the structure for our paper, you should be knowing by now that we have section A, B, and C. And this is what you find in your section A. In section A, you will be assessed on compulsory short questions, which are allocated 30 marks, and the time spent in section A should be 20 minutes. And the two subtopics under the business environment that we will look into, or the two subtopics or main topics under paper 1, will be business environment and business operations. And then remember that in your question 1, you will then be assessed on multiple choice, which will be allocated 10 marks, choosing the correct weight in the list, which will be allocated 10 marks, and matching items, which will refer to matching column A and B for 10 marks as well. And remember, the time you should spend here is 20 minutes. These are normally more of low order questions because these are one-word answers, and you will be using your letter A, B, C, and D depending on the type of question. Then section B, with your section B, we are looking into now your interpretation, your scenarios, and where you should provide explanations. So section B, before you start your section B, there's an instruction that would say to you, choose any 2 questions, because in section B, you are having 3 questions, but you're expected to answer only 2 questions. And then the mark allocation there is 80, and the time you should spend is 70 minutes, which is equaling to 35 minutes per question, because remember, you are expected to answer only 2 questions. So for question 2, you will be having business environment for 40 marks. And for question 3, you'll be having business operations for 40 marks. And then question 4 is a combination of both, whereby you will be having business environment allocated 20 marks and business operations also being allocated 20 marks for 40 marks. And this is a question that we call miscellaneous questions because it combines both aspects of business environment and business operations. Then we also have section C. With section C here, we are looking into an essay type question whereby the instruction will be choose 1 question. And then you have question 5 and question 6. With question 5 and question 6, you choose 1 essay. The essay in question 5 will be focusing on business environment. This can either be your legislation. One of the legislations can be assessed as an essay, or it can be business strategies. But when you look into question 6, the essay can either be human resources or quality of performance. And the mark allocation there is 40, and the time you should spend in your section C is 30 minutes. Now the main topics. Remember, in paper 1, we have 2 main topics, business environments and business operations. The purpose of today's revision is to look into business environments, whereby we are looking into the following under business environments: business sectors and their environments, which was covered in term 2. Impact of recent legislation on businesses, which was covered in term 1, together with business strategies that were covered in term 1. And then when you look into typical essay questions, you can only have questions under these 2 subtopics. You can have an essay maybe on impact of recent legislations. Remember, you have 8 legislations, so 1 legislation can be an essay. And then you can also have an essay on business strategy. So it is important for you to plan around to say when you are studying, you should know that your question 5 essay can come from either the impact of recent legislation or business strategies. And you should also look into your previous examination papers to say in the previous year or in the last 2 years, which questions came in question 5. And remember that assessors will not bring the same question over and over a year. So they will swap and change because they can have impact on recent legislation in 2022 and have business strategies in 2023. But when we come to 2024, they can bring another subtopic. So you should look into preparing between the impact of recent legislation and business strategies for question 5. And remember that if it doesn't come in your question 5, you are still covered because they will be assessed in question 2 and they will also be assessed in question 4 so that you become safe. So if this is not an essay, it can also be assessed in question 2 and 4. Now, for example, this is how an essay would be structured. This is an example of an essay in question 5. You have a preamble. This is a preamble. It's a statement that tells you about the essay you're about to be writing about. So this focuses on mainly reminding you of what the subtopic you are dealing with is about. So the Consumer Protection Act, for instance, is Act that was Act number 68 of 2008. Which promotes consumer rights, and the National Credit Act, which is Act of 2005, Act 34, was introduced to ensure that businesses address the needs of consumer credit market. These acts are beneficial to both businesses and consumers. Therefore, it means do not quote. Do not quote anything from the preamble because it will be marked as R, meaning repetition. So now the first thing you should look into is the instruction to say you are an expert in consumer legislation. That's what they are saying to you. So write an essay on the following aspects. So this is your focus area now. This is what you write about. And remember, in an essay, there will be no situation that requires of you to identify or quote. You will only be expected to write what is given, and these will only be direct questions. Hence here, the first one says, discuss 4 consumer rights according to the Consumer Protection Act. And another one says, explain the purpose of National Credit Act. And another one says, evaluate the impact of National Credit Act. And it also says, recommend ways in which the business can comply with the National Credit Act. So what you should know is that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 subheadings, and your essay should start with an introduction, and it should also have a conclusion. So you should make sure that you have 2 points in your introduction and 1 point under your conclusion, and make sure that at least you have 4 points for each subheading. Remember, I said you have 1, 2, 3, 4 subheadings. So that will allow you to get 32 marks or 32 max for the body of the essay and the content you are writing. Another example of an essay under question 5 can be an essay on business strategies. Remember, I spoke about the preamble to say make sure that you do not quote anything because it will be marked as R, meaning repetition of facts, because you are repeating something that was given to you through the question paper. So your focus should be on write an essay on business strategy. So the preamble is read in the following way. Businesses realize the importance of the strategic management process when devising suitable business strategies. There's no answer there. And some businesses maintain that Porter's 5 forces model plays an important role in remaining positive in the market environment. Now, the instruction to you would be write an essay on business strategies in which you include the following aspects. You describe the strategic management process. Number 2, you discuss the 3 types of intensive strategies that the business can use to address the challenges of the macro environment, and you also explain how businesses could apply Porter's 5 forces model to analyze the market. And then also the last part would be advise businesses on the effectiveness of diversification strategy. So remember, you should have introduction again and have conclusion. And in between, you should have your first subheading, your second, your third, and your fourth subheading. Now, Let us look into section B. Remember, we are talking about business environment, meaning the focus will be on identifying from the scenario if we are talking about question 2, and we will also look into the content that you can think about or that you should know for quoting from the scenario. So as we start with question 2, typical questions on paper 1, this is to say the following content has to be identified from the scenario or statement. So I'm about to show you all the content you should be able to identify from the scenario. So let's start. Let us look into legislation. All legislations can require of you to identify them from the scenario. Remember, you have Skills Development Act, you have Labor Relations Act, you have Employment Equity Act together with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act together with Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act together with National Credit Act and Consumer Protection Act. So when it comes to the acts, you can be expected to identify the acts from the scenario. Let me show you how. This is a typical exam question which will require of you to read from the scenario and answer questions that follow. So the scenario is by a business called Cyber Enterprise. Cyber Enterprise sells smartphones online, and the management of Cyber Enterprise allows employees to form a trade union, and Cyber Enterprise also ensures that there is implementation of affirmative action. Now, 2.1 would then be one of the typical questions which would require of you to identify the 2 acts applicable to the scenario above. Motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario above. So as you can see, as I said, all this content will require of you to identify, because these are concepts which will also be guided by the motivation. So the scenario will be having any aspect of the concept that will help you to identify the concept from the scenario. In this regard, if you have studied very well, you should be knowing that when we are talking about the management of cyber enterprise allowing employees to form a trade union, we are talking about what? We are talking about labor relations, because it talks about the relationship between the employer and the employee. And when we are talking about cyber enterprise, ensuring that there is an implementation of affirmative action, this is your keyword, and it talks to what? Affirmative action is a policy under Employment Equity Act, which talks about hiring those who were previously disadvantaged, however, when they are suitable and having the skills. So you consider them in the process of employing. Therefore, this means you have your 2 answers, because your keyword here is affirmative action, which talks to EEA, and your keyword for trade union is LRA. So the keyword is the word trade union, but make sure that when you quote the entire sentence from here, the management to the full stop, which says now allows employees to form trade unions. And then CE also ensures the implementation of affirmative action. You quote it in full. So that's how you should do it. And then 2.2, explain the impact of the act that is identified in question 2.1. So this is the follow-on question. So it becomes very, very important for you to know how to identify from the scenario, because you'll have a follow-on question which is dependent on how you identify from the scenario. So for instance, if you will fail to identify the correct act from the scenario from this question, it means you're going to explain the impact of the incorrect act, which will mean you'll lose 12 marks. So that you should avoid. Now, the solutions, as I've outlined, the solutions should be labor relations, because of what? The management of cyber enterprise allowing employees to form trade union. And then we should also have what? Employment equity, because cyber enterprise also ensures the implementation of affirmative action. So 4 and 2, and a total is 6. Then let's look into the impact of the 2 acts, labor relations. What is the advantage? It ensures that there's participation of all parties in the collective bargaining process, which will reduce conflict in the workplace. Because remember, labor relations is about labor peace. And then we also talk about the idea that it protects the business and employers organization in labor related issues. Then that's how you get your 2. And then when you look into the disadvantages, the implementation of labor relations may be very costly and time consuming, especially the dispute resolution process. And then that is the disadvantage, because anything that is very costly and that wastes the business time is considered to be a negative. Productivity may decrease significantly if employees engage in trade union related activities during work hours. So that is another disadvantage. Then as we proceed, we look into Employment Equity Act. What are the advantages there? It encourages diversity in the business. That's labor relations, because it hires those who were previously disadvantaged. Those who were not in those areas of workplace are now in. We have now males and females in workplace, and we have now young and old people in the same working environment because of the idea of previously disadvantaged. So it ensures that all those who were previously disadvantaged are given opportunities. So hence we say it encourages diversity in the workplace. And remember, the word diversity means accommodating different people in one business environment. So it encourages diversity by employing people from various racial backgrounds. And then another advantage is that it provides all employees with equal opportunities during the selection and the appointments and promotions in the workplace. Then, what are the disadvantages? Businesses must submit employment equity plans and compliance certificates before the business can conduct with the state. And then another negative is that training costs for the business will increase, because employees need to be correctly trained regarding the implementation of Employment Equity Act. As we proceed, this is what you should be able to identify as well from the scenario. You should be able to identify the provisions of the act we call the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And then you should also be in a position to know that under consumer protection, you should know how to identify the consumer rights. Then when you look into the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, you should know that under the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, you should also be in a position to identify the pillars of Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. This is management control together with ownership, together with skills development, and enterprise and supplier development together with social responsibility. Remember, we summarize them and call them Moses, M standing for management control, and the O standing for ownership, the S standing for skills development, and the second S for social responsibility, and the E standing for enterprise and supplier development. Now let us look into how you would be expected to identify them from a statement in this regard, because our previous activity we were looking into the scenario. Now, identify is the verb used again. So when the verb is looking for you, when the verb applied is identify, you should know that you are only identifying a concept. So it says to you, identify the provisions of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act that Lerato Construction complied with in each statement below. So 2.2.1 says to you, employees are required to give due notice before they can end their employment contract. So which provision is that? So also note it to say we are talking about what? Giving due notice before ending an employment contract. Now, it means there's a contract being terminated there. Then Lerato Construction does not force its employees to work more than 3 hours or extra per day. And then 2.3.2 says to employees are advised to produce a medical certificate if they are absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days. So 2.2.1, here employees are required to give due notice before they can end. So ending, meaning ending their employment contract. So this is a provision we call termination. Termination of employment. This is what we call termination of employment, 2 marks. That's how you identify it. There's no motivation here because this is a statement. Then Lerato Construction does not force employees to work more than 3 hours. So this is a provision because of 3 hours. This is a provision we call overtime. And then you get 2 marks for that provision. And then employees are advised to produce medical certificate if they are absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days. I know at the back of your mind you might be saying this is sick leave. It does not fit. It is not correct if you say sick leave. Why? Because the question is identify the provisions of BCEA. The question is not saying identify leave as provision. But if the question was to say identify leave as provisions as a provision by the BCEA, then you would then answer it to say sick leave. But in this regard, because there's no question that says identify leave provisions that are provided by the BCEA, the question is looking for provisions. And I know the example used here is that employees have to produce a medical certificate. So the answer here is supposed to be leave, but not sick leave, because sick leave is then relevant to a question that is asking for identifying types of leaves. But here we are not looking for types of leaves, we are looking for provisions. So the provision that is applied here is leave. We are not answering the question that says type of leave, hoping it makes sense. As we proceed now, we look into now how you would be expected to identify the pillars of broad-based Black economic empowerment from the statements. So 2.3 says to you identify the pillars of broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act, which is act that was developed in 2003 and is act number 53. That MPO auditors has complied with in each statement below. So MPO auditors uses Temba shuttle service to transport their employees. Now, we should understand MPO is well established, and Temba shuttle services to transport the employees. So it means Temba shuttle services is a small business. So what is MPO doing here? MPO is developing this business. So the pillar that is applicable here is it skills development? Is it management control? Are we seeing anyone being promoted to management after being previously disadvantaged? No. So the answer is supposed to be enterprise. Enterprise and supplier development. Then they have donated laptops to schools in rural areas. So this has to do with giving back to the community. So this would be considered to be social development. Then MPO auditors has promoted 2 Black females as heads of various departments. This is considered to be management control. This is management control. Why are we saying management control? Because it talks toward making sure that those who were previously disadvantaged are given management positions. As we proceed, we have another identify, but this time we are identifying the consumer rights that are implemented by Calio Ltd in each statement below. So 2.4.1, the salesperson allows customers to shop around for the best price. And then when we look into another one, we say 2.4.2, customers are charged at the same price in there for this. And then as we proceed, 2.4.2, customers are charged the same price for the same goods or service in the different areas. And then as we move, then consumers are given a warranty for durable products. So as we look into this, we need to analyze it as well and identify the keyword that helps us to identify what is the correct consumer right. So consumers have the right to shop around for the best price, meaning these consumers have a right to choose, because as you are shopping around, you are making a decision on what to buy. And then when we look into customers are charged the same price for the same goods and service in different areas. So we see an element of fairness by that business because they are being fair. It doesn't matter where you are, the price remains the same. 2.4.3, consumers are given a written warranty for durable products. So what do you see there? You see someone who's dedicated as a business to provide quality, hence a warranty is given. So the first one would then be the right to choose, and looking into the issue of charging the same price in the same market. This would be the right to equality in the consumer market because there is fairness. And then when you look into the one that talked to a written warranty given because of the selling of a durable product, this would be considered to be the right to fair value or good quality. And you get your 6 marks. As we proceed now, we look into the other content that is expected of you to identify from the scenario. This is industry analysis tools. So you have the following industry analysis tools: SWOT analysis. We have Potter's 5, and then we also have Pestel elements. So we should know that the 3 tools scan the 3 environments. SWOT analysis would scan macro, Potter's 5 would scan market, and Pestel elements would scan macro. Then Potter's 5 now, let us look into what is your Potter's 5. Your Potter's 5 talks to the following: the power of the supplier, the power of the buyer, the power of competitors, the threat or the threat of substitution or substitutes, and then the threat or barriers of new entrants to the market. So you would also be expected to identify the Potter's 5 forces model that is applied in the statement. So in this context, the business that is applying this Potter's 5 is called Louisa's Hair Salon. So 2.5 would then say to you, identify the forces of Potter's 5 model that are applied by Louisa's Hair Salon in each statement below. 2.5.1 says now, Loazi opened a new hair salon across the street offering services at a lower price than Louisa's Hair Salon. And then that's number 1. And what do we say there? Loazi opened a new hair salon, and Louisa is operating a salon as well. And they are saying across the street offering services at a lower price than Louisa. So what do we see there? Are we seeing substitution? It cannot be substitution because these are similar services. So this should be the threat of what? Or the threat of what? Or the power of what? The power of competition. And then Louisa's Hair Salon is highly profitable and attracts many new entrepreneurs to start to enter the market. So what do we see there? We are checking to say, as Louisa is applying Potter's 5, Louisa should be in a position to check if is it easy for other people to start offering the same service she is offering. So if it's easy, then it means there's no barrier to enter the market of creating a salon. And another thing is what makes people to want to start salons as well is because they are saying here Louisa's Hair Salon is highly profitable. So immediately people see that the business is profitable. Everyone wants to join in so that they can also enjoy the profits, which will then mean the business is not having what now? Is not having a barrier. So it becomes easy for another person to start a new salon. But on the context or in the contrast, we can also say, is it easy for someone to start a bank? It is not easy because a lot of money is needed for one to start a bank as a business. But because it's a salon, it becomes easy to start a salon because the information around starting a salon is available to everyone. So it becomes very, very easy. And because the salon is profitable, it allows for more people to then want to start a new salon. So we say in this regard, the element that is applied here is the barrier or threat of entrance into a market. So the barrier is less because of the nature of the business, which is profitable and not difficult to start. So as we proceed, the answer should be the Potter's 5 models, and the 2 that is applicable here would be the power of the competitor and threat of new entrants into the market. Then the other one is 2.6 will then say explain how businesses could apply Potter's 5 models to analyze their position. This is how they can do it. For instance, when you're looking into suppliers, the business will then be assessing itself against its suppliers. So what the business will be doing is to assess the power of the supplier in influencing the price. And then they should know that suppliers that deliver high quality products may have power over the business because they are delivering quality. So then the supplier has power because of the quality. And then the supplier will have power to influence the price because they are offering quality products or raw material. Then as we proceed, we look into the power of the buyer. So what is the business going to check here? The business has to assess how easy it is for buyers or customers to drive down the price. And another aspect is that other buyers can do the following. Buyers buy in bulk, or buyers buying in bulk can bargain prices in their favor. So this is to say other buyers will buy in bulk, and as they buy in bulk, they can then demand for a discount, which will help to reduce the price. So this is how then a buyer can reduce the price. Then when you look into the power of competitors or competitive rivalry, the business will then look into itself and look into the competitor. And this is what they will assess. They will assess if competitors have unique products or services. Then, because if competitors have a unique product or service, they will then have greater power over the one the business is having, because what is key is that the business is looking into its position to say between me as my business and the competitors, what power is the competitor having. So in this regard, if you find that okay, the competitor is having power because of the unique product, it means you should also make the product of your business to be unique. And then another one is that a business with many competitors in the same market will have very little power in the market, because every competitor will keep on coming up with a new product which might threaten the power of the business. Then threat of substitution or substitutes. Here we look into, for example, a substitution would be coffee and tea. They substitute one another. So if businesses' products can be easily substituted, it weakens the power of the business in the market. And then another one is that it establishes what? The business should establish whether the sellers of a substitute product have improved their product or they sell lower quality goods at a lower price. Then as we proceed, we look into threat of barriers of entrance into the market. What is this? This is about a new business establishing, a new business entering into the market. Where is a market? A market is where buyers and sellers meet. So we are saying if there are 10 sellers, is it easy for another seller to come in and make the number of sellers to be 11? So these are the barriers that can stop a new seller from coming into the market. If barriers to enter the market are low, then it is easy for new businesses to enter the market or industry. For instance, what are the barriers? A barrier creates a stop. So for the sellers, if there's only 10 sellers in a market selling the same product, the question here is it easy for seller number 11 to come in and sell? So what will stop seller number 11 can be high cost or high startup cost. If it is expensive to start that business, it stops the seller from coming, or a new seller from coming into that market. If there is a lengthy registration process before the business can sell, it stops another seller from coming into the market. So if the barriers are low, it means the capital needed is little. It means someone can start selling. It becomes easy. So this is what barriers to enter the market is about. So the business should then look into the market they are selling in and check if it is easy for other businesses to start selling. And then if there are few suppliers of a product or service, but many buyers, it may be easy to enter the market. So this is another aspect that can lead to new suppliers or new sellers. It says if there's few suppliers of a product or service, meaning if there are few sellers, then and many buyers, it might be easy for a new market to start selling. Then We look into Pestel again, Pestel factors as environmental scanning factors. So Pestel factors include political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. And this is a question that you can get around the Pestel factors in section B. You can be expected to go through this scenario and identify the questions. So for instance, 2.7 says, read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Martha and Jane Furniture. Martha and Jane Furniture specializes in selling office furniture, and the profitability of the business has decreased due to high inflation rates and low income levels of customers. And then Martha and Jane Furniture had to pay a hefty or heavy fine because they did not renew their trading license. 2.7.1 is the first question, which requires of you to quote 3 challenges that Martha and Jane Furniture have from the scenario. So you're expected to quote 3 challenges for Martha and Jane Furniture from the scenario above. And as we can see, the first one is that the profitability of the business has decreased due to inflation, and also this is because of low income levels. That's another challenge. And MJF had to pay a hefty fine because they did not renew their license. That's another challenge over there. Then, as we proceed, 2.7.2 says, identify the Pestel factors and link them to a challenge as quoted in 2.7.1. And then 2.7.3 says, recommend one way in which MJF can deal with each challenge identified in 2.7.2, and use the table below as a guide to answer question 2.7.1 to 2.7.3. Let us look into our solution. You were expected to quote the challenges. So the first one was the profitability had decreased due to high inflation, and another challenge was that there is low income levels of customers. Customers are having low income levels, and another challenge was the fine because the business failed to renew their license. And then which factors of Pestel are affected there? Economic factor because of profitability decreasing, social factor because of low income levels, and these, remember, when it comes to social, we're talking about customers and consumers, so they are affected socially. And then legal factors because of failing to register a new trading license. And then what are the recommendations to deal with these Pestel factors? Economic factors because of the decrease in the profitability is that the business can borrow money from financial institution when interest rates are favorable, not during inflation. So that's 2 marks. And then social, we are looking into the idea that because customers have low income, then sell substitute or generic products at a lower price. Then when you look into MJF, have you find the business should comply with legal requirements for operating businesses? And for example, by researching on what is the trading license requiring, the trademark registration and patents. Then, with that being said, we look into aspects that you should know how to identify further. These are types of business strategies. So here we look into identifying the types of business strategies. We have 3 strategies over there. 2.8 again says identify, and I have highlighted the identify in red so that you see that this is a content that you will be expected to identify from the scenario. And it says here, identify the type of business strategy that Suzy Furniture Manufacturer applied in each statement below. 2.8.1 says Suzy Manufacturer took over Andre's Furniture to gain control over the direct distribution of their products. And then 2.8.2 says Suzy decided to sell her existing furniture in a new city. And then another one says here, 2.8.3, Suzy Furniture decided to add food manufacturing plants to increase the sales. So the question is for you to identify types of strategies. How many strategies do we have? We have 4, and this is what I call them. I call them DD, so that you remember. This is the strategies we have. I call them DD. Why am I calling them DD? Because you should know that you have integration, and you have intensive, and then you have diversification and defensive. So when they are saying Susie manufacturer took over Andres Furniture to gain control over the direct distribution, therefore the answer that is applicable there should be integration strategy. Then Susie decided to sell her existing furniture in a new city. So this must be intensive strategy. Then Susie manufacturer decided to add a food. So anything that has to do with adding, and you see Susie's adding food and Susie specializes in furniture. So therefore this should be what? Diversification strategy. And that's how you'd be expected to identify. And the solutions, as I said, then we look into identifying the types of defensive strategies. So now we are looking into a certain type. So the types of defensive strategy, remember we have 3 types of defensive strategy. And then this includes retrenchment, divestiture, and liquidation. So when they are saying Mega Construction sold all their assets in order to pay their what now creditors, because they sold all, we are talking about what? This should be liquidation. Then when you look into the other one, they terminated contracts of many employees due to reducing the cost. So when they want to reduce the cost, this is what? Retrenchment. This is considered to be retrenchment. Then we look into 2.9.3. The management decided to close their unproductive information technology department. So when you're looking into that, the answer there is supposed to be what? Divestiture. And then we move to the content that you should know how to code. You should know how to code everything under legislation. Why? Because you can be expected to code ways to comply. You can be expected to code penalties from a given scenario. So you should know how to code ways to comply with for each and every act, and penalties for each and every act, and that would help you to do very well. So be able to code ways to comply with all legislations and be able to provide other ways to comply. Should a follow-on question be asked? So this is an exam tip for you. Then as we proceed, you should know how to code furthermore the labor relations. Under the labor relations, be able to code the employer's rights and the employee's rights. Under National Credit Act, be able to code consumer rights. And under the skills development, be able to code maybe the meaning of leadership, roles of sitters, and your national skills development strategy and the human resource development strategy together with funding of sitters. Then let's show a practical activity over there. 2.1 says read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. Katlego Logistics. Katlego Logistics complies with Labor Relations Act, which is Act 1995 and Act 66, by observing the rights of employees in the workplace. So employees take part in legal strikes without any fear of victimization. So this is number 1. And number 2, they say they are also locked out by Katlego Logistics to prevent damages to the property, and the trade union representatives are given time off to attend to their respective duties. So 2.1.1 says quote 2 rights of employees in terms of Labor Relations Act from the scenario above. And then 2.1.2 explain other rights of employees in terms of what? The Labor Relations Act. So you should be careful as you go through your scenario. There will be a distractor. A distractor is a sentence that is included in the scenario that is not applicable, for instance, to the employee's rights in terms of labor relations. We know that one of the employee's rights is to take part in legal strikes without any fear of victimization. That's quotation number 1. This is the first correct answer. But when they say they are also locked out by Katlego Logistics to prevent damages to the property, then this is not an employee's right, but this becomes the employer's right. So this is the employer's right. And then the trade union representatives are given time off to attend to their respective duties. So this then will talk to what? This will talk to the employees as well, because employees have the right to take part in trade union activities and be given time off to attend to these duties. So you should be aware of the distractor. So normally there will be 3 sentences, and out of the 3, they will all look correct, but you will be guided by the question. Mostly the question will look for 2 aspects to be quoted, and the last one or the third one will be incorrect. So make sure that you quote the correct sentence from the scenario. So the correct ones will be what? Employees take part in legal, and another one is that trade union representatives are given time off. Then that's how you get your 2. Then when we explain other rights of employees in the workplace, we say employees have a right to join a trade union of their choice, and then they have a right to receive again or to refer unresolved workplace disputes to the CCMA. They have a right to refer any unresolved CCMA dispute to the Labor Court on appeal, and they have a right to request trade union representatives to assist and represent employees in a grievance or disciplinary hearing, and they also have a right to establish a workplace forum where a business has 100 or more employees to resolve work-related issues. Then another aspect where you can be expected to quote from the scenario can be on the consumer rights according to or in terms of National Credit Act. As you can see here, we have Pestel Bank EP. Pestel Bank offers various financial products to prospective clients. The bank allows clients to receive pre-agreement documentation before concluding any credit transaction. And then Pestel Bank ensures that clients shop around for the best price, and they also allow clients access and to challenge their credit records. You are expected to quote as well here, because under the rights of National Credit Act, according to the consumer rights, you only have phrases or sentences, but you do not have concepts. Hence, we say quote is the verb that is applicable in this regard. So the 2 consumer rights that are applicable according to or in terms of National Credit Act would be the idea that the bank allows clients to receive pre-agreement documentations before concluding any credit transaction. That's correct. And they also allow clients to access and challenge their credit record, which is correct as well. So, but what is the distractor there? When you look into the scenario, the distractor would be Pestel Bank ensures that their clients shop around for the best price. So obviously for the best credit offer that the bank can offer. So when you look into other consumer rights in terms of National Credit Act, consumers have a right to apply for credit and be free from discrimination. Consumers have a right to receive reasons for their credit being refused, and consumers have a right to receive protection of their personal information, and consumers have a right to receive information in plain and understandable language, and consumers under National Credit Act have a right to receive documents as required by the Act, and they have a right to fair and responsible marketing, and consumers will also have a right to choose which goods they will buy and return such goods if they are not satisfied, and they have a right to surrender or return goods to credit providers in order to settle the outstanding amount, and they have a right to apply for debt review or cancelling if consumers cannot afford to repay the debts, and they have a right to receive protection from being held accountable for the use of the credit facility they reported the loss or theft, and they have a right to refuse credit limit increase. So that is the content you'd have to quote. But when you look into business strategy, this is the content you'll have to quote from the scenario. Again, it will say read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Onet Stationery, OS or Onet Stationery implemented the diversification strategy to increase the market share. Now, OS looked forward and backward into the implementation process, and OS identified strengths and weaknesses by conducting environmental scanning, and OS identified deviations from set standards and took corrective action. Now, code to remember the verb is code. Code 2 steps that Quote 2 steps in strategic evaluation from the scenario above. So look for the distractor. During evaluation, there's no way the business is going to identify strengths and weaknesses, because evaluation will happen after the business has implemented the strategy. Therefore, this sentence over here that says OS identified strengths and weaknesses by conducting environmental scanning is a distractor, meaning it is incorrect. But the two correct answers would be OS looking forward and backward into the implementation process, because to evaluate is to check whether the strategy worked very well or not. And then OS identified deviations from the set standards and took corrective action. To say again, when you're implementing a strategy, during the evaluation, you're checking if the implementation is accurate. If it's not accurate, what do? You fix whatever you see to be inaccurate, and then make sure that you take corrective measures to help and the implementation process to be successful. So hence here, it also says advise the management of OS on other steps in strategy evaluation. As we proceed, we look into the solutions. So the correct one would be what now? Would be 1, looking forward and backward into the implementation process. Then number 2 would be, this is 1. Then number 2 would be OS identifying what? Deviations from the set standard. From the what? Set standard. This is 1, is correct as well. Then we move to another aspect to say explain other steps in strategy evaluation. This would be to examine the underlying basis of a strategy, to set specific dates for control and follow-ups, to draw up, for instance, a table of advantages and disadvantages, and also to decide on the desired outcome and consider the impact of the strategic management or implementation in the internal and external environment. And this would also be, and then that would be all. And then the last part is to look into business sectors and their environments. Here you will always have a typical 9-mark question, which will be of a scenario as well. For instance, we have Zalo Enterprise. Zalo Enterprise sells what? Zalo Enterprise sells a variety of products to different customers. And then ZE always receives stock late from smart wholesalers, and the management of ZE has difficulty in dealing with unproductive employees. Quote 2 challenges for ZE from the scenario above and classify ZE's challenges according to the what? To their business environment, and then state the extent of control that ZE has over the business. So the challenges are very straightforward, is that they receive stock late and they also have difficulty dealing with unproductive employees. So here's the scenario, and these are the challenges already quoted for you to make things easy. They always receive stock late from what now? Smart wholesalers. And then another one is the management of ZE always has difficulties in dealing with unproductive employees. That's another 1 mark there. Then which environment is applicable there when we are looking into receiving stock late? It should be market. It should be market environment. Then which environment is applicable when looking into dealing with the difficult employees? It should be micro environment. And then when we look into the extent of control, the business would have less control. And then when you look into the micro environment, the business would then have full control. The business would have full control, meaning it would be 1 here, 1, 1, 1, and 6 marks in this regard. So that's how you'd be expected to deal with such a question. So when we look into that, let us look into our summary. We dealt with the structure of the paper. We looked into the main topics, and we focused on one main topic when we were looking into interpretation of section B and section C. We looked into business we looked into business environment, and we looked into the following: the legislations. You looked into your 8 legislations and how they can be assessed. We looked into business strategy, the strategic management process, the industry analysis tools, the strategic evaluation, and the types of strategies. And we also looked into SWOT analysis together with Potter's 5, on how to identify and apply Potter's 5, Pestel, how to deal with that on the exam. And then we also looked into the types of strategies, how to identify from the scenario and how to identify from the statements as well. And we also then looked into the business environment and business sectors, which was the last part of our lesson. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Keep well. Goodbye.